see you this morning. As Rob has indicated, this is a specialist Chamber of Solutions this morning. Before I do anything, I want to particularly thank Andover Chamber, which is part of the Hampshire Chamber network, which is supporting us today. And I know has this particular topic as a very important factor in the work that they do and we all do together across Hampshire Chamber. Wellbeing, I think, is becoming an essential ingredient, and it's in the last few months that we've recognised just how important that is. When we're distanced from our colleagues, recognising the need of the well-being of our colleagues across the whole organisation becomes paramount. But there's more to it than that as well. I think the important thing is also how we can work together in our communities, which is why Andover Chamber is so interested in this particular subject. Looking to build partnerships across the community, looking to volunteer within your community, all of these factors come into play, and I think we're going to hear a lot about that today from our expert panel. This is your Chamber of Solutions. We would love you to hear your voice today as much as possible. We want as much interaction as possible. We've got a size of audience today which will allow almost everybody to ask questions and to participate in the dialogue. So please do come forward and with your ideas, questions and positions, because we need to learn from you. Importantly, we want to take forward the work that we're doing here. We want to build a partnership across Hampshire led by the panel participants today. And so you'll be hearing a little bit about that as well. So please do come forward and work with us on this. I'd like to thank Mission Performance for supporting us in all of these Chamber Solutions, as Rob says. I think we both lost count. It may be our 10th. We'll say it's our 10th, but it's certainly, it certainly has been a very interesting road, and I know that we're going to go places with this. But also, I'd like to thank Mercer's, who's helping us today, and also Menzies, who's helped us along the road with this program throughout. I think that's really it for me. I'm going to have to apologise because I'm chairing another Zoom meeting which starts at 11. So I'm going to be disappearing about 10:30, but I'll be fully active and participating until then. So please do ask me on chat any questions you want, and I will make sure that the Chamber responds to you and gets back to you. But once again, welcome everybody, and back to Rob.
Thank you very much, Ross. So just to reiterate, if you've got questions, use the chat function. If you want to get our attention, you can use the participants panel. There's a little raised hand you should have available to you. If you click on that, your name will shoot up the list just below the last co-host, and Bob will point it out to me and Ross, and we can ask you then to address the chair, address the panel with your question. So chat and raised hands, two ways to get in touch with us. So without further ado, a quick introduction to myself. Rob Lewis from Mission Performance. We're a professional services business. We help businesses and their leaders help change their behavior. We help them to lead, coach, and communicate more effectively. We're based in Lyon, the Solent, and before COVID-19, we used to travel the world delivering our programs, but now we're all doing it on a virtual platform. So a small business down in the south, so very keenly aware of some of the challenges that we're all facing. Helen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so Helen Walker. So I've got 20 years leadership experience in a number of domains, one including education. I'm passionate about learning and the learning journey and taking organisations with me on that journey. And I'm also passionate about helping others, which has landed me in my current role where I'm CEO of Andover and District MENCAP. So we support people specifically with learning disabilities and really have a spotlight on helping them towards their next steps and focus on their well-being.
Thank you, Helen. Christina?
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm from Mercer. We are a global organisation. We have over 25,000 people globally, and we have about 4,700 in the UK. I've got a joint role as head of culture, Mercer UK, and also a fairly new role as the regional market leader for the South. Really interested in getting to know local businesses more and hopefully you can learn more about Mercer. We do a whole range of employee benefits and consulting with clients on retirement and investments, career planning, and health and wellbeing. And I'm particularly passionate about wellbeing. I met Helen literally a couple of weeks ago, and I think we've become best wellbeing friends. And I've met Terry over email and things. So really excited to talk about wellbeing today with you.
Thanks, Christina. And Terry?
Good morning. I'm Terry Bishop. I work for Unity. We're known as a council for voluntary service, but we run community services across Test Valley Borough, a whole host of services that are designed to help vulnerable people to improve their lives. And I'm passionate about that and the fact that we run a volunteer centre and how important volunteering is to communities. I'm the chief executive and I've worked in infrastructure bodies for some 20 years. So I have a little bit of experience of how the community operates, and I'm delighted to be able to engage with you all today.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, panel. I think that this particular subject is becoming ever more apparent to all of us. And in order to give us a broad perspective and to frame this morning's conversation, Helen, I'd like to turn to you to give us a broad perspective of the topic that we're about to discuss. So over to you, Helen.
Okay, so basically we are in a situation, it impacts us all, and we can't really control what that means to us all as individuals, in terms of organisations and in terms of communities. We're at the start of that journey, and in terms of our people and taking them through that, it's really, really important that we put a spotlight on the key things and enable ourselves and equip ourselves to get through this in the short term, but in the longer term, develop integral strategies, ways of working that actually keep wellbeing at the centre of everything and ensure that we are getting the best out of our teams, out of our communities and our people together. So in terms of that overview, we're sort of going to take you through the journey so far that we've had. We're going to focus on what the data tells us in terms of looking at key reports and understanding what this means. And we're going to focus on taking a person-centred approach, which in my opinion and our opinion is absolutely mission critical to ensuring that we develop the best and tailored strategies, tailored both at individual and organisational level. It's a journey and we understand that, and what we do know is that our Wellbeing Alliance that we've brought together so far, this will help us to support organisations and support communities and run alongside them to make sure we get the best possible outcomes and get through this together. So in terms of my focus, it will be that person-centred and taking you through Andover and District MenCap's journey so far, which I hope you'll, identify some key areas that you can say, oh yeah, I think that would work for us. A very, very practical approach, and really would like you to engage with that with me and share your great stories too.
Thank you, Helen. And Terry, we're going to turn to you now to give us a bit more on the charity community perspective, a little bit more detail before we then turn to Christina.
Okay, so from the services that we provide, which range from transport to shop mobility to volunteering to home support services, our primary focus over the last 12 weeks has been providing the reaction to people being isolated at home, and we help to develop the COVID helpline for Test Valley, and as a consequence are now working with the Borough Council to deliver out to the community to help them in whatever form they need, whether that be from shopping to prescription collections or other errands. What that has meant is that we've also mobilised volunteers, of which many of them will be furloughed staff. I would say, looking at the statistics, and I do have some stats with me, that more than 4,300 people have been supported in Test Valley since day one, and that doesn't include those that have received repeat prescription collections. Of that, we've recruited 5,200 volunteers, and 2/3 of those are furloughed staff. Mm-hmm. So our focus, apart from the fact that we already run a lot of volunteering services, and the volunteer centre that we provide is kind of a matching service. So it's a bit like a recruitment agency, I would say. So matching those skills with what's already available and what charities and community groups need in the community is a colossal workforce, and what we are now beginning to find, because as a consequence of all this work, we're now doing callbacks to people to find out if they're okay, and a lot of people are not okay. They're very isolated, they're very lonely, and now we're finding that some of the volunteers are very nervous about going back into the workplace. So we have various roles to play now in helping people to move forward. I think this is phenomenally timely for us all to be working together, and this alliance seems to be the perfect opportunity for us to look at ways that businesses can benefit, individuals can benefit, and my experience is that volunteering is absolutely the right step to help people to get back into work who are feeling lack of confidence. And I'll be honest, I've been shocked by just how challenging people have found this whole experience of being at home. And also, you know, if you have the freedoms to be able to volunteer, the next step back to work can be quite daunting. So from our point of view, we're already putting some work into play to enable us to help those people to transition back. I think it's absolutely critical that we think about just how challenging it is for people. It's been a very stressful time, and some of our work now is about trying to encourage furloughed volunteer staff who are volunteering to remain as volunteers moving forward, because I think that gives them an opportunity to actually take smaller steps back into the workplace. I know from my business point of view, I'm trying to battle that, as well as I've got furloughed staff, I've got shielded staff, and I've got volunteers I'm trying to help too. So it's kind of a really, really important that we get this strategy right, because there's a lot of people that have been impacted. I just also would like to say that in our period of working with the COVID helpline and all these callbacks, I mean, we've spoken to at least half a dozen people who are suicidal, not just worried about going, you know, whatever next steps are going to be for them. So, you know, I think we can't be too flippant about, you know, some of the issues that we're facing. And from business point of view, I mean, it's actually, I'm worried about how I'm going to re-engage my own staff. So, you know, I've got all of this to balance, really. Excuse me. Some of the services that we provide include community transport. I've got 11 buses, two accessible cars, and 50 volunteer drivers. We're now being told half of whom aren't confident enough to go back to driving. Without that, I can't provide a service. And I'm sure you have in your own communities and your own businesses concerns. Volunteering actually does improve health and well-being. There are statistics that prove that. And I've got examples where we've brought people into our organisation who've been struggling with mental health problems, brought them in as volunteers who've subsequently gone back to full-time employment. And I'm really proud of that. You know, there's a real power here that we could enhance and do something very, very positive with. I was also asked to give a bit of feedback on Citizens Advice, who are in Andover, also Test Valley wide. They run 2 offices across the borough, And some of the issues that they're picking up are issues around personal relationships, domestic violence, which has grown incredibly, and mental, not just domestic violence, physical, but mental as well. They're picking up issues around financial poverty, and we're having that too, because we do have a team that do home support services. So we're also seeing issues around financial poverty, rent arrears, which is also looking at, evictions, housing issues, and a lot of people are suffering. A lot of people are suffering. In an upbeat way, because you always have to finish on something positive, there are things that we can do to help. And I think as a collaboration, this is perfect.
Thank you, Terry. Christina, can you tell us a little bit more about the sort of strategic approach, and then we'll loop back round to some very practical things that that our audience can take into their businesses. Christina, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's interesting listening to Helen and Terry and talking about that mental health. And when I first came on the call, Rob said, "Blimey, you've got a legend in the background there. This gentleman with a toddler and a baby and a laptop, and he's working away. But actually, how do we know how he's feeling? Inside, he's probably going crazy. It's like, oh my goodness, how am I going to cope with this?" So, these issues are very, very, very real. So I just want to talk to you really about a framework that Mercer use with our clients to sort of bring all of this together, really. And we use 4 very, very simple pillars. So we talk about physical well-being, we talk about mental well-being, social well-being, and financial well-being. And I'd just be interested to hear from you, in the chat as I'm talking, when somebody says well-being, what's the first word that comes to mind for you? Because it's actually very different for different people. If somebody said to me well-being, I'm like, out on my bike, I love it. To me, that's well-being. But to somebody, to my husband, it's actually sitting listening to his music in the lounge. That's the best thing he can do. So it's very, very different for different people. And I just want to touch on Terry's point about giving as well, because we do a lot of work with we've got a Dr. Wolfgang Seidel in our business, and he does a talk on the psychology of happiness. And it's absolutely proven that people are happier giving than they are receiving. So, this whole Wellbeing Alliance, it very much ties in with the wellbeing conversation. So just talking about physical, mental, social, and financial, what we then look at is actually horizontals across that. So we would look at prevention, intervention, and protection. So just some examples. If you're looking at physical, prevention, you can look at things like the NHS Eat Well helpline. You can look at walking clubs. You can look at just getting groups together for a running club. For protection, you could actually look at a occupational health scheme. Quite often companies have these. Have you actually reviewed that scheme recently? Quite often people haven't actually looked at the sorts of protection that they have in place for like up to 6 to 10 years, and this is just a real opportunity to look at the sort of plans that you have around that. So if we look at mental health, simple things like mindfulness apps. Are you actually telling your employees, just spend 10 minutes doing mindfulness in the morning? That might be the right thing for them. Access to employee assistance programs. Again, a lot of these things come free with policies that you might have in place already. So attached to your life assurance scheme, you might have an EAP. Do your employees know about that? Do they have access to that? Do they actually have access to the helplines that Terry provides, for example? Do they have access? Helen probably provides services there, as I'm not probably, you do provide services there. Do people know about these things? Social well-being, things like just communication and apps and volunteering. So just one example in Mercer, we've got an internal social media platform called Totem. And I'm shielding somebody at home. I can't go out and I didn't want to go out and physically volunteer, but we had a lady that was knitting these COVID bears. So I bought one, and I donated money on top. I gave £25 to the NHS. So for me, I was giving, and that was a way of giving back to the social community. But the app actually enabled us to do that because we were talking about different things. And I just talk about financial, because the financial well-being, as Terry said, it's a massive thing. And at school, we're not really told how to manage our finances. We're not told to maybe save £5 a week, something as simple as that. And again, what employers can do is actually provide some financial workshops to help people or signpost people to different things. Just very simple things like, you know, people might have been off, they might have been furloughed, they might not want to go back to work. The older generation actually might think, actually, now's a good time to retire, but they don't actually know if they can afford to retire. So we run like later life workshops and things like that. So the point is, if you use a very simple framework as an organisation, you can capture what you're already doing, you can see where the gaps are, and then you can just look to see what's out there. And through this Wellbeing Alliance, we can really help you to particularly look at free resources that are out there, because everybody's looking, you know, everybody's a bit cash strapped at the moment. So, you know, have that conversation. Actually, you could do this, you could do that. And then, you know, if you want to go further and you haven't got any money to spend, then you might want to put a flexible benefits program in. You know, you might want to look at a communications application. And again, there's lots of free stuff out there. So that's where Mercer can help from a business side of things.
Thank you, Christina. We've got a question from Paul Cliff. I'm going to ask Paul in a second to address it to the panel. Before we do that, Helen, can you give us a summary of what's different about the Wellbeing Alliance and what benefits it presents to our audience potentially?
Okay, so we are focused on doing this because it's the right thing to do. We have got specialist areas and specialisms within the charity sector and from our partners, where we can tailor what organisations need, what teams need, what people need, and we can signpost and build together and help companies running alongside them develop some great strategies, some great things to trial out. We can signpost key resources that might help in the short term, but in the longer term, we're happy to step alongside and build some really lasting relationships where we can start to build really great tailored requirements, because although the themes are generally the same, the themes that are coming out of COVID-19, nevertheless, the impact on every single person is going to be different, and the mixes required to meet their needs, to think about their well-being and to make sure they feel supported as part of their organisation is absolutely essential. So we're happy to work together very strongly. We're happy to work on mirroring what COVID brings, not just now, but as the situation unfolds. And we're happy to work fluidly together and make sure that regardless of our individual specialisms, we're selflessly signposting and creating almost a toolkit and resource pack of, look, this is where you go for this help. We will help channel you through this, and we're prepared to make that investment. And you might think, well, yes, we know why, but the bigger why the longer term why? And it's focused on making sure that we're working really well as communities. Because if we do that, and if we work in a way that puts people front and centre of our communities and highlights their individual and organisational needs, we can just all benefit from that, but without doing anything significantly differently, without an additional cost. It's just better ways of working. So we want to encourage these better ways of working and start that momentum right now.
Great, thank you, Helen. Paul, I know you wanted to talk about individual agency. Would you like to raise that point with the panel for wider discussion? Paul Cliff?
Hi, Rob. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please do. Please address the panel.
It was just, I guess, my kind of observation, I suppose, is that well-being is very dynamic and it means different things to different people at different times. And about, all of those, the range of potential resources that we've talked about that might help people. I think the diversity of those resources is the critical piece, because people will need different things at different times. But the point, I guess, is that it helps individuals develop individual agency so they can help themselves. And the thing that I guess I'm interested in is there are some stats that have come out from Expert HR and CIPD that through lockdown, businesses actually are suddenly doing a lot more to help the well-being of the workforce. And the bit that interests me is, what can we learn from this experience to make sure that we can initiate those support mechanisms for normal day-to-day absences from work, because we know that people suffer from the same kind of challenges that we've talked about this morning when they're off from long-term sickness absence, or particularly my MBA research was focused on the impact of engagement and well-being following parental leave. And people suffer from the same challenges in return to work after these. So I guess my question, and I'm interested in what the panel have got to say about what can we learn from what we've done to support people in COVID-19 and make sure that we continue to support people when they have their own everyday crisis as opposed to a global pandemic.
Yes. Well, Paul, that's a really good point. I think, Christina, that might be one that you could pick up. But from my perspective, I think that the Wellbeing Alliance, which is it is a new concept, is that it provides a gateway for a range of different services that people can access to do precisely what you're requesting, Paul. What's the first step? What are the range of experts you can tap into to get their specialist expertise that you can utilize beyond and out the other side of COVID? So, Christine, I'm sure you've got a view on that.
Yeah, sure. And we can learn an awful lot, I think, and it's given people just an opportunity to act differently. So, for example, technology. Everybody thinks, oh, I can't meet anybody in person, but honestly, I have learned more about local businesses and my own colleagues during lockdown and isolation than I ever would have done. And one thing that we've learned at Mercer is that this individual need that we talk about, that actually you will have some people at home doing homeschooling and they're struggling with that. So we've actually created a buddy system. We've never done that before, and actually it would have been probably more difficult to have done it when everybody was at work, because you tend to think, oh, we better do that in person. But because we've done it during lockdown, we've got a bank of 4,700 people that can actually help each other. So we actually said, first of all, who wants to be a buddy to help somebody through a conversation? And then we said, okay, who needs that help? So we're matching people depending on what their need is at the moment. So it might be that we've got people caring for others, but they're struggling with that. They don't want to talk to their HR director. They don't want to talk to their boss. What they actually want to do is talk to somebody in the same situation. So I think what we can learn is just take those positives, take those innovations that we have that we have created, and actually use them going forward. And another thing that we've done is that we've learned we can provide intellectual capital very, very quickly if we want to, and we have learned that we can work with partners to actually create something different. So, for example, this week we're planning on announcing that we've got a partnership with somebody where we can actually provide testing kits for all of our clients. Now, we never would have been that nimble before. So I think it's learning at the organisation and learning at the individual level. Yes.
Okay. I suppose that as we're returning to work, as the announcements are coming up, Helen, what specific advice, what should, as business owners or business people, what should we be thinking about? What should be top of our list of priorities in terms of that, making that transition back to work as effective as we can do for people?
Okay, and I think bringing that question together with our first question, I think this is a good opportunity to step you through our practical journey and then help sort of think about what do we do next. So, based on my involvement in this Wellbeing Alliance, we know there's a universal drop in positivity. It's not just affecting some people. The Hayes Wellbeing Matters report, published in May and gives data for the period April and May, that references 16,000 professionals' input to, okay, how do they feel? What's happening for them? It's hit all sectors. The key themes that came out of that was the lack of social interaction, the loneliness, which we've already talked about, the boredom, the juggling work, family life, what a challenge that is when you've got deadlines to meet, and that a lot of people didn't feel that like their employers had provided any wellbeing support at all during that period. So what were the key themes that came out of that report and is relevant to what we're talking about this morning? In terms of people wanting remote working moving forward, 45% of people said that that's what they really wanted. In terms of working from home more frequently, 36% plan to ask to work from home. And that in terms of prioritising their health and well-being, 35% wanted that raising in terms of its importance. I think as well, a key theme that's consistent with what we're talking about this morning is that 21% of people want to work for an organisation with greater purpose and social responsibility. So again, that's where our charity focus and partnering and effective solutions that are tailored to meet both needs, that's where they can work. I think as well, it's really important to say that 47% believe better communications and 16% believe better training opportunities would help them in terms of getting through this period and beyond. So first of all, we need to be mindful of those things that came out of the survey, and that, you know, keeping learning, taking notice of the people we support, making sure that we give, and making sure that we're connecting with each other. I think the being active as well, absolutely essential, and that fits with Christina's focus on the wellbeing pillars, which I'm sure Christina will build on after I've mentioned these key areas. So we know the landscape's changing. We know that we've got to do things differently to be great. In my opinion, this person-centered approach, what does that mean? It means starting with on that now. It means, if you've not done already with your direct teams or their teams, putting that front and centre in terms of that empathetic approach, understanding what's going on for your teams, who's suffering, who's flagging and you don't know why, and what can you do about it. And it's almost understanding that just flagging that at this initial stages is really important, and then seeing, okay, what's important to that person, what do we know, and then building a strong, robust organisational structure that ensures that your line managers are equipped to spot the warning signs, to really empathetically support their teams, and to, I think more important than anything else, just to keep that communication flowing, because, you know, we've been on that journey, and we know how important it is. So obviously, you know, the key themes again I've focused on. I'd really like to take you guys through our journey at Andover and District MenCap in terms of the specifics, and hopefully that will be the catalyst for you sort of saying, okay, we've tried this. This is really working for us. So Rob, if you're okay with this, I'm just going to launch into the practical things that we've been doing.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the mobilising initially, obviously exciting, new, really scary, and our communication was every day with our teams and with our wider team, so that we all felt the support of the collective team, not just the individual teams that were part of that. We got used to our new way of working, and, you know, it was rocky. You know, we're all on the change curve. We're all going through, I think it's probably going to be a change roller coaster that I'm sure the Kubler-Ross change curve will develop into to take us through this COVID journey. Our key focus has been on communication and making sure that we're listening, those interactive environments where we have a team sort of download, upload, you know, what's the engagement like? Who's not talking? What do we need to do about that? How do we need to adapt what we're communicating about? And making sure that we've got our finger on the pulse, so supporting everyone and dealing with their ups and downs and doing our best to support them through that. We've done the periodic staff surveys, and, you know, I've got a great people partner, Lisa Rogers. So she's really got her finger on the pulse, listening to people, what are their needs, and then us scoping our strategies to mirror that. In terms of taking everybody on the journey, if there's one thing I've learned more than anything else through our journey so far, don't leave anybody behind, you know, and it's important that we all have an awareness, not just about our own team, ourselves, people around us, what's going on. Oh yeah, that they appear to be, disengaged, suffering a bit. They're not their usual selves. It's making sure that we've taken everybody on the journey. In terms of the coaching, you know, if coaching is your style in your organisation, I would say mission critical right now. Just get your great coaches. They might be in different roles. Get them so that they're actually leading on this process and sharing and helping people get through their personal blockers. And think about the fundraising activities that you can do. So we've had an absolute blast. We have been rather silly. We've done the hula hoop challenge. We've done that to raise money for the people we support, but 3 of our leadership team members all got involved on the hula hoop challenge. You'll probably see it on social media if you're connected to me. And we built up the hype. We didn't take ourselves seriously. And we did the trash talk with each other and made sure that we hyped the event. So we learned quite a few new skills through that hula hoop challenge. So it had some really good outcomes. In addition to that, we've got the end of July, we've got a mini Olympics planned. So we're going to sort of do garden-based ones where they're videoed. And we'll sort of, I don't know, have egg and spoon races, hula hoops, you know, different events based on people, what they love to do, and sort of do those timed challenges, getting everybody on board with that. So in terms of the well-being and the practical things, don't, you know, every new project is great. Give it a go. Be okay to have trial periods. If it doesn't work, what's the worst that can happen? You do something different. In terms of what's gone on for us, if you focus on the business and the organisation, we've had a fantastic opportunity put in front of us in terms of a change in landscape. Yeah, it's debilitating at times, but we've really worked hard to initiate positive change projects. So things that were in our business plan, you know, 2 years down the line, they're front and centre right now. We've got key people whose roles were sort of temporarily redundant. We've engaged them in the social media. We've engaged them in creating an outreach activity service. They've absolutely loved that, and other people have hopped on board with that. So again, think about the exciting change things you wanted to do. You probably got further down the line. Think about them right now, rescope it out. And I think in terms of looking at building a great picture, you know, and again, I think this is echoed in the audience, it's you build that together. This is not a finished article. It's try some things out, build them into your strategy if they're fantastic. And then those great things, incorporate them and be flexible. And I think my learning, being so accepting, being accessible, being agile, business-wise, projects. Oh, okay, I'm really good at building team events. I'm going to create this event and see how it goes. Think about those things and those links with the wider community. Because for my personal well-being, the links with Christina, with Terry, with the other charities we've been getting on board, it's great because we're doing something great for everyone.
Great, Helen. Thank you for that. I know that Christina has got some points on the communication and engagement tools. What I pulled from that is that as we start to return to work, the importance of an open dialogue, focusing on individual needs and having that discussion will take time, but we've got more time now, and that time invested in those conversations will pay dividends as you return to work. But I think that the communication engagement tools that Christina might be quite useful to share some of that insight with our team.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's you know, you can use Instagram, you can use WhatsApp, you know, you can use Twitter, you can use LinkedIn. There's all these public forums, but actually sometimes people are quite scared of sharing things on those sorts of forums. And obviously you can't sort of, you know, communicate internal benefits packages and things on those very easily. So We've got two tools that we use at Mercer. One's called Elect Engage, and it's specifically designed for small to medium companies. We're offering out to clients free during COVID, and it's actually just a platform where you can put all of this information on. You can put all your documents on there. You can put your links to your EAP on there. You know, anything, but also you can communicate out to your employees, just reminding them about all these services that are available. We also have another tool that we've just launched called Ondo, and that's specifically around engagement, culture and communication, and it's around helping leadership to create this culture around well-being and actually give those right messages. And an example of that, we use a version of Ondo internally called Totem, and we've recently looked at our culture in the UK. Well, we've been working on it on the last year, and part of the plan of that culture was to create a culture challenge. Our idea was that people would get together, they would sing, they would do videos, you know, anything. And we thought, oh my goodness, how's this going to work now? And actually we got 53 different teams from around the country entering this culture challenge with just different videos and examples of teamwork, of how they were living and breathing our culture. And I think the point is, if you have this platform for communication, you actually get people encouraging each other and inspiring each other and motivating each other, because people see that other people are doing stuff. And you also get the odd thing like, I'm struggling today. And before you know it, you know, 5, 6, 7 people have reached out to that person, and you can give kudos. And then in a couple of days' time, you see kudos, Nat reached out to me. Thank you very much, Nat. So it's just examples of communication tools that you can use. So, yeah, and you know, they really, really have worked. So, you know, again, happy to talk to people about those.
So Terry, I'm going to ask this question of you. So, with where you sit at the core of so many different services within your area, how can businesses like us, for example, use community engagement as a really positive step to help people return to work? How can we help us to do that?
I mean, I think in Hampshire it's slightly different from Surrey, because I know we've talked about Surrey being there's work going on in a similar fashion over there. I think from our point of view, there are unities or council voluntary services right across Hampshire, all of whom run volunteer centres. So if your organisation was looking at volunteering, and of course I'm very well aware that, you know, not one size doesn't fit all, and people want different things in their toolbox. But to contact the local volunteer centre is the easy way forward, because they will have access to a myriad of different opportunities that are available. Or if organisations are looking at maybe team building, for example, which by the way is actually quite difficult to address for businesses, for a host of reasons, but then the volunteer centre is a really good starting point, and I can provide, you know, information if anybody wants to contact me about that. The reason I'm saying that team building is difficult, because we do recognise that lots of businesses want team building events, but if you're looking at volunteering, for example, then there are barriers for us trying to identify those sorts of facilities, because not all organisations have their own buildings that need painting, not all organisations have gardens that need tidying up, and sometimes where those facilities are requiring help, you need DBS checks. Yes. So, you know, it isn't always an easy one, and sometimes we groan when businesses come to us with, you know, we've had our 10th requirement for a team building event this year. You know, it's quite difficult, but where there's a will, there's a way. And I think one of the things that is very clear to me is that we, and I'm sure the business community are, but in the voluntary sector, we are known as being really adaptable. We have to meet the needs of the community, whatever that looks like, and develop something to enable that to happen. And I think this is where the power of an alliance like this comes in, because we can all be adaptable together. And although I've talked passionately about volunteering and the COVID helpline and the things that we've done, every day we're adaptable. And talking about learning the lessons, I mean, we've learned so much in the last 3 months, I can't tell you. And, you know, from being more virtual, because that wasn't really on our radar at all, improving our social media, getting involved in challenges. I mean, we did we developed a 2.6 challenge when the 26-mile when the marathon was kind of on its teetering. So we were looking at alternatives, and we kind of kicked that off in Test Valley. Not to raise funds for us, but to raise funds for struggling organisations. And I think that's the benefit of working with the charity sector, is that we're used to being adaptable in a way that perhaps business communities haven't had that opportunity. I mean, I do appreciate a lot of you probably are, so please don't take it as a slight. It's not that, but I think we're just used to it because we have to be, because funding doesn't allow us to be one thing, you know, for the whole of our lives. Funding that we receive and means that we have to be adaptable to meet local needs. And I think this is a cracking opportunity for us all to take the view that not one size doesn't fit all, and let's make something new that will be a great toolbox for all of us.
So, for example, if I was looking at returning my team to work over the next 2 to 3 weeks,
Yeah.
I would give you a call. We would have a conversation about, our context, what we were trying to achieve, and you would help us across the sort of 4 pillars that Christina was introducing to help us put a plan together to for that return. Is that essentially what?
We can absolutely do that. I'd quite like more than 2 to 3 weeks, but perfect world, but absolutely we can. We can look at all of the outcomes that you want and how we can work with you to address those needs for your staff team. There are limits at this moment in time, you'll know, but that's what we're here to talk about, isn't it? How we can plug those gaps.
And I'm sure there's people on the call as well that have got some creative examples of how they've kept their teams engaged, kept close to their people. And I had a bit of research the other day that when you're on a video call like this, it prompts a fight or flight response from the amygdala in your brain, because you've got, on a call like this, you've got so many different people staring at you. You think you're in a fishbowl for 90 minutes, and it prompts this fight or flight. And I know some organizations that openly say you can turn your videos off if you want, so you can walk around in your pajamas and drink a cup of tea, or you can engage at your own pace. So it's been a very steep learning curve for all of us. I know what I take out of the Wellbeing Alliance is that you've got that gateway, much like a GP has in primary care. The GP can direct you to a whole range of different services that perhaps were not siloed or not in one place. Returning to work has so many different facets to it that having a gateway to all of those different services, I think, is a real positive. I know that Michelle Jacobs, you had a question about volunteering, and would you like to put that to the panel?
Morning all. Yes, a while back, so before COVID, I'd applied to Southampton Voluntary Organisation because I wanted to get back into volunteering, especially with young people. And the feedback that I got was that because I was no longer living in Southampton, I'm in the Eastleigh borough, that I needed to apply to Eastleigh. Whereas I'd always lived in Southampton, so I knew the organisations and knew some people that were in that sector, and that was my kind of rationale. So I just wondered, with the voluntary side of things, have you ever come across it being location specific?
Shall I take that one?
Yeah, go for it, Terry.
I suppose sometimes, but I think if you were living in Eastleigh and wanting to do something that was specific in Test Valley, where we're based, we wouldn't preclude you from that. I know Southampton Voluntary Services very well. I'm kind of surprised that they gave you that answer, Michelle, if I'm honest. But we don't. I think it's quite often the challenges are if it's to do with becoming a trustee on a board, because sometimes boards of trustees would prefer to have people that are in their location. I've not necessarily seen it from other areas, because I think people are really keen generally to have good people from wherever they are that are going to come and support their organisation. So I am kind of a bit surprised on that.
I know one of the things that they did come back to me on by email was about expense costs, because I was outside of Southampton. So I did go back and kind of say, you know, I wouldn't be looking for any expense costs. But again, expense costs were not something that I even would have considered.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that expenses can come into it, but that will be down to the individual charity that you're looking to support. I wouldn't have said, and I can't speak for colleagues in another area, but I wouldn't have said that would preclude us from having that conversation with another charity. And if the person is saying, actually, I'm happy to donate my time, then I think they're mad not to take up that opportunity, to be fair. But yes, I mean, there have been in the past, when I've worked in other organisations, when we've had people want to volunteer from us from outside of the area, we have had to take that into consideration, because we don't have, you know, vast budgets. But you know, I don't think it's a common thing. But all I would say is that obviously all the volunteer centres are independent. We're all independent charities, all the CVSs, although we're linked in one way or another, we're all very independent. So we have our own governing boards, we have our own constitutions, and we all have our own policies and guidelines. So, you know, don't take one as the example of everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Jude, I know you've been active on the chat. From your experience, anything that you could share that would help on this topic, please feel free to contribute.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's been very interesting listening to everybody, and certainly I like what Christina was saying about the pillars of well-being, and also what Helen was saying about the flagging, or being able to flag up when someone's in distress. And as a mental health first aid trainer, I've been very passionate about getting people in the work environment to talk more about their mental health. And I think the thing that comes across most is that people are a little bit wary of trying things, because they are scared to not say the right things or that, when in actual fact, if you just start, if you say something, if you at least show that you care, then you can't go wrong. And yes, you can learn more, but basically, you know, it is about just making that first connection and being able to show people that there's, you know, people that are willing to listen. And on the other side, about sort of things for well-being, I do a lot of creative stuff myself, but one of the things that I find really therapeutic is doodling, because and actually certainly on Zoom meetings I find it helps me to concentrate. But yeah, there's a great sort of release in doing creative stuff, and you know, using it to express emotions and all that. Yeah. But yeah, very interesting to hear what everyone's got to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Jude. I'm going to share something from Kerry, who's can't actually voice her question, but she was talking about the role of line managers with employees, and how the variation in a line manager's skill, perhaps even will, to perhaps listen and listen to the needs of an employee, a colleague, and react accordingly. I think that's a really important point. The willingness to slow down, to reach out, to really truly listen to somebody's concerns takes time, effort, commitment. And I'd imagine that with line managers probably going through quite a lot of, experiencing quite a lot of pressure on their shoulders, it might be quite difficult to find that time, but it's so important to be able to do that. And there are, you don't necessarily have to be a trained coach to be able to do that. There's some basic questioning and listening techniques, but more importantly, just the will to spend time staying close to your team. Christina, did you wanted to come on that?
Yeah, no, I was just saying, and it's looking for the cues. You know, I was on a call with one of our senior partners in Manchester the other day, and he said, "Oh, can you just stay on the call? I just need to let you know about something." And he'd been, somebody that reports to him had been going through a really, really difficult time, and it's clear that he just needed to offload. And he started welling up, and I said, "Look, why don't I be your buddy? Let's have a call every 2 weeks." And he said, "I would love that." And it's just looking for those clues, isn't it? And actually, us all taking personal responsibility to reach out to people, because even though we are on Zoom, you can still see if people are struggling.
Yes, Ross, I know that you got a perspective on this.
Yes, thanks, Rob. I think the interesting thing is, and I think somebody said it earlier. It might have been Paul, that you know, people have agency. And the thing about when we're in our work environment, and particularly when, you know, we are continuing to work, we haven't been furloughed, but we're now working from home, it's very easy for us to click into that empowered agency that we feel that we need to have at that particular time and express that. And sometimes that makes it difficult for the communications around the secondary, tertiary needs, which are bubbling under and are going to start to take control, come forward. And I've noticed that particularly when it comes to sort of issues around training and progression. The interesting thing about the past few months is that it's been a great time of sort of empowering people to take forward projects and take forward ideas and do things that have maybe been bubbling under within the organisation, but maybe through home working and through remote teams, it's allowed a degree of innovation and that sort of work to take place. But it's too easy to then presume that everybody is feeling confident about that, and I think that's an important factor in all of this. There are, you know, it's exactly the right time to have conversations around skills, have conversations around training and development, and empowering and supporting people to do that. There was an interesting thing that it was actually on a program yesterday, and David Owen, you know, Dr. David Owen, as was the former Foreign Secretary, he was saying that, you know, 15 to 20% of all people are in a situation where they do need help. They're not actually in a situation where they can say that they have access to their own agency in all areas of their life, and they do need help and support. But what happens is that they're not accessing that for that very reason. And it's up to us as managers, and I think it's up to us as employers to really recognize that even our most progressive and those that seem to be in most control are not necessarily so. And I think it's that when you have to open up those conversations and have them without pushing it, because obviously people have, you know, things are in confidence, but actually providing that opportunity to have those conversations with everybody, not those people that you think you've placed on a list who might need help, but actually everybody, because that will open up and access, I think, certain conversations that might not otherwise happen. And I certainly today I've been, you know, completely bowled over, to be perfectly honest, by the possibilities of what could happen with the Wellbeing Alliance. And I think the Chamber certainly would like to have further conversations around that and see where we can take that, because there isn't a business out there that couldn't benefit from what could be gleaned from that, and that's right across the whole of Hampshire. So as my parting words, because as I did unfortunately say, I do have to go in the next few minutes, I think that Wellbeing Alliance could be something that could really help to address businesses in all situations. And obviously in this new normal, it will be absolutely a priority. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to disappear, but I'll see you at the next one, and take care. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Ross. Diane, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just put a note on there. Just wondered if anyone else was worried about the well-being of people who've. I'll talk about it personally from here. We've seen a lot of people have acted very differently than they would have been if this hadn't happened. So people who've worked from home, the negativity towards people who've still come into the office, and then obviously you've got people who are furloughed. I just worry if anyone else is worried about when the whole team all comes back together in other organisations, how that's going to work. Because I worry about how people have been behaving and how going forward we're going to be okay again, because it's and it's not. I'm talking about it here, but I have talked to other people who've had similar sort of things going on, really. So I'd just be interested how anyone else feels about that.
Helen, would you like to start with that?
Yes, I would. Yeah, and then it comes down to that sort of gentle landing into work. And what does that mean? So forget strategies that you had before. Forget the tools that you had before. Think about now, every single person, what are they going through? What are they might have anxieties about certain things coming back into the physical workspace. Yeah, that might be a big thing for them, bigger than someone else. But that it's understanding that everybody's not going to feel like that. So in terms of what we're doing, we're focusing on listening to everyone, absolutely key, understanding what are their blockers, and then tailoring a plan for reintroduction, and then saying there's no rush to this. Why should we rush? We're working, we're achieving our outcomes, we're settled in our new environment. We've scoped out our workspace differently so that it's really welcoming. And then we'll think then about agreeing individual flight paths back into and landing into their workplace. And, you know, for some people that might cover a 3-month period. Others, it might be actually, no, I've done a couple of weeks now, trialing out 1 day, 2 days a week, a few hours a day for someone else who feels that impact might be too big for them. And then making that okay. And I would suggest in terms of the strategies, make sure that in overall terms, just planning for just a proportion of people coming back at different times, trying it out, see how it goes, being there for people in those first few days, some great new activities, things to think about that might, you know, just make them feel good, the baking, all of those things. But again, I don't want to prescribe too much. I think the important thing is listening, then creating something for your team and your teams that actually makes that a really look forward to event and feel good event, not just what it looks like, but what it feels like. And if someone, you know, again, we talked about the line managers and then picking up, something's not quite right, but I can't put my finger on it with that. I think this person needs help in my team. Just flagging that is okay. And that, again, that's where the Wellbeing Alliance comes in, and we can sort of say, we've tried this out, we can support you in this way. We can maybe help that person if they've feel that they want to meet their altruistic needs and work for a charity. Yeah, we'll support half a day every other week as part of their individual plan, where they can come in and support, you know, help support the people that we support. So there's almost like a full jigsaw of different tools and techniques that you can apply. But the most important thing is knowing your teams and then being flexible with timeframes and what does the future hold. Give it a go. If it's rubbish, you can always say, that didn't work for us. It's okay. We'll try a new technique.
I think that's a really good points, Helen. I think, Diane, that the importance of naming it as well, being honest about creating that sort of shared context, that we're coming at it from different perspectives, but we're naming it, that there are differences. People feel differently about coming back to work for a whole host of reasons, but naming it, having an open conversation where perhaps you model the way with, you know, you make it okay to have those type of conversations. But I think naming it is a really important first step, being completely honest, getting it out on the table. And then, as Helen said, putting a plan together to tailor a return to work for specific people, I think is a good way forward. But the emphasis that Paul Cliff talked about around the responsibilities of leaders to step up and take responsibility to create the environment for people to have those conversations, I think is really, really important. Roger, you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. It's a really interesting point that Diane's raised there, and something I hadn't thought about as people return to work. So we're starting off with a very measured approach and in a very controlled way for people who are coming in really from a vulnerability point of view. But I think as we follow on into the next and later stages, as we get more people back into the offices, we're going to have people with different beliefs and attitudes, and that is really going to, I think, has the potential to present some challenges, just sort of, for example, around social distancing and kind of adherence to policies and procedures, how they've conducted themselves in their personal lives. So I think that's something that organisations are going to have to address. There's probably a couple of things really, which is around leadership and culture, and really starting to set those expectations out quite early. So it doesn't suddenly just get dropped on people at the last minute, the week before they're coming back. It's a continual program of communication to set those expectations as to how we should all behave and support each other and respect each other as we come back into the office. So I think it's a really good point, Diane.
Yeah, I agree, Roger. I think that our people will judge us of what we did in these times, moving back into the return, and the closer and more resourceful we are as leaders to facilitate that effective return to work, the better. I know that Lisa, would you like to raise your point to us?
Yes, I mean, I guess just following on from Diane's comments and the others that have preceded as well, I think it is, we've seen in society generally that people have had judgments on how people have reacted in this situation, whether they've chosen to send their children back to school when they've been allowed to, or whether they haven't. And I think it's those. So we've got the practical elements where we need to think about, okay, who is struggling at home, and we might want to prioritise bringing back into the workplace when it's right to do it. Who's worried about coming back to work, and we want to leave them where they are for the time being. But it's that relationships and the feel that actually I might feel that because I've been forced to work from home, because that's essentially what's happened. We've been forced. It's not a choice. I might feel more hard done by than those who are actually at home and not having to work, and are perhaps perceived to be able to enjoy time with their families more and do their own sort of leisure activities. And it's all those underlying things that could be bubbling away that I think Diane, was sort of referring to, that we'll need to have that focus on and awareness of. And one of the things that we've been doing is looking at promoting some of our underlying and core sort of values around how we treat each other, and around communication, and around trust and respect. And the one I've been saving for this time is around feedback, because actually, if people have been adhering to how we want to communicate with each other, how we've all signed up to communicate with each other, for that to be respectful, and for us to trust that people are doing, the right things for the right intentions. And actually, if they're not, how do I give that feedback to them? How do I have that civil conversation with them without it being difficult and confrontational, and to say, actually, I don't understand why you've just done that, or you've behaved in that way towards me, or you've come right up to my desk when actually I've been used to having people away, whatever it might be, to help the relationship issues that I think we could well have, because people will have felt either I think there's a natural instinct to think that other people have had it better than us, and we get into that victim mode of, okay, I've had it a bit harder because I've still had to work, and I've had to, or whatever it might be. And it's recognising those, and recognising how everybody's situation's been different.
That's really good points, Lisa. I think that everyone thinks they're going through this on their own, but in effect, they're not. And probably everyone on this call's got a different insight or perspective on exactly the same topic. By sharing it in this forum, we can and beyond, we can help one another through the period. Diane, did you want to come back?
No, I was just going to say that I'm glad to hear that it's not just us, and I think there is an element of, yes, people have had it better. I things will never be normal again. It's going to be a different thing, and I've taken a lot from what people have just said, actually, that probably some of our team haven't been talking as much. You know, we have a Zoom call on a Friday, everyone's welcome to come on it, but some people don't come on. It seems to be the same ones. And I'm just thinking personally, maybe I should reach, you know, I'm not their manager, but maybe I should reach out to those people that aren't coming, because they might be coming on for different reasons. It's it's interesting.
I suppose it puts us leaders, people with responsibility, in the spotlight, doesn't it? Because, you know, before these challenging times, you'd almost audit how you use your time as a measure of what you valued, especially with what we do at Mission when we're coaching execs. We used to start with their calendar, Outlook calendar. How much time did they spend getting around their people? If you value your people and you've only got 1 hour blanked out for one-to-ones, then that's clearly you're not living up to the values that you espouse. So I think it brings into a sharp focus, doesn't it, for us to actually invest time. This is Paul's point from earlier on. People will judge you if you're prepared to spend a disproportionate amount of time in a relationship. It tells that person that you value that relationship, and that investment will stand you in very good stead. You know, having the difficult conversations, which I think will probably get more difficult as the time goes on. So staying close to your team, I think, is absolutely crucial, and naming it with your team, I think, is important too. That level of honesty and shared context that we talked about. So Helen, did you want to come in? You have a perspective on that?
Yeah, and I think just building on what you've said, the honesty, the transparency. It's okay to feel like that today. That's not a problem. You know, I've had people who I work with very closely, and you know, I do invest that time, and it's almost, well, don't worry if you feel like that. You know, if you're a bit snappy, don't worry about it. It's not a problem. Okay, how can I help? How can we help? And then it's like you said, that investment of time now, even if you didn't give it before, again, what we did before, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that you're doing things differently this point forward, because actually COVID-19 does allow us to do that. It allows us to reinvent. It allows us to rethink, actually, this is really important. And I've realised, if I didn't before, it's important to me. It's important that I protect my teams. And I think that I felt that. I've never wanted to protect my teams more. So that means me sort of thinking, all right, I've got these deadlines, but I'm going to spend this time to invest because I know one member's suffering. Or actually, you know, I know that this other member I can have a belly laugh with them, and, you know, we'll not take things too seriously. So it's understanding and reaching out. And I think if we don't, we will suffer when we don't need to. We will struggle when we don't need to. And I think at individual, organisational and community level, we can struggle less, we can have more fun. We learn when we're having fun. We all know this. And I think, you know, to really consolidate what we're trying to achieve, through the Wellbeing Alliance, we won't pretend to know all the answers. We will work alongside those organisations that want to step along this with us. We will help you develop your strategies. We'll take you through the first steps. You know, Christina, Terry, I have thrown our whole selves into this and thought about how can we help you in these initial stages. We'll let you sort of talk through, and we'll listen to you and talk through your own circumstances, and we'll sort of help you take that person-centred approach. And it's just that supporting, because it's the right thing to do. And because, you know, who cares whether we did it before? We're working differently now because it makes sense. We all know it. Our people are at the centre of everything. They're all at risk in one way or another. Some financial, some, you know, the mental well-being, some physical, some people for everything. But we can step you through those first steps and support you as an organisation to feel like, no, I know this is okay. it's okay as an organisation to feel like this. I know where I can get signposted support, and I know that that'll be tailored to, because it's selfless giving, and that's good for us too as charities, because that's what we're about. So, you know, I know we've developed a resource pack for the people who are attending today, just to give the essence of that and capture that, and to make that signposting and first steps easy, just to, so that we're sharing and we're getting there together again.
Might be a nice, good step for you, Diane, to hook up with Helen and the team, because they could provide all of that. And you talked about, you know, getting the team together. You know, I'm sure that Helen and the team have got some great ideas to bring that extended team of yours perhaps back together in some creative ways that perhaps you hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
Safe in the knowledge that you're dealing with some real specialists that you know, specialists in their own right, but when you put them together in one room, so to speak, you've got access to all of the other related opportunities, but also challenges that your team might be facing, whether it be financial or regardless. They've got people that can help, a one-stop shop. So that's a good first step for you. But I think that generally speaking, the period that we're going into with the release of the lockdown and 2 meter to 1 meter rules, and all things are changing as people start to return gradually to work, these issues will become even more important. We know they're important right from the get-go, but they will become even more important, especially when looking at recovery and coming out the other side of this, in terms of retaining that level of engagement and commitment with your team. They will be judging us and how close we stick with them, in order that we can come out the other side stronger as a team of people and as a business. So I'm conscious of the time. It's 10 to. Any further questions? Bridget, you're unmuted. Did you want to speak to the, did you have a question? A point to make? Bridget?
About the alliance, that's the most important thing.
Go ahead. Can you say that again?
Hello, sorry. I was just saying that I'm interested to know about the alliance. That's something that I'm, you know, new to, and would be interested, both from a charity and a business perspective.
Okay, who'd like to pick that up quickly? Signpost you.
Yeah, Helen, go on.
Okay, so we've been working tightly together to understand how we can support initially. As part of the resource pack that we're going to release, there's mine and Christina's contacts. You'll get a perspective on the strategy and the strategic approach. And again, Christina, I'm going to let you talk about that next. But from my perspective, it's almost, you know, based on mine and Terry's strong bond, that charity cluster that we're building. So again, we've got some key players at the moment focused on the financial aspects, the volunteering, what's purposeful, in terms of potentially domestic violence. And we've got the U Trust are on board with this alliance and providing training in terms of highlighting and picking up signs of domestic abuse. And again, if that's an area you feel passionate about, there'll be opportunities to train and then support as part of your new career mix. So, you know, in terms of different people in different organisations, what both Christina and I have committed to doing is allowing ourselves to speak to you initially, understand where you're at, what your needs are, and support you selflessly through these initial stages, and then we will build and grow and mirror. Christina.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add, it is new. It's something that Helen, Terry and I have just been talking about, and it is absolutely about creating this alliance within Hampshire to bring wellbeing to the forefront, because we know how important it is. So we're actually using our different skills. So very simply, it's charity, community, business working together and it's at 2 levels. So it's working with organisations to look at, okay, how are you meeting the wellbeing needs of your organisation? But what we'd also like to do is work across companies as well. So say we had 10 companies in the alliance, we'd have a get together like this, and we'd share ideas, just exactly what we've been doing now, because actually by talking about them, you realise you're not alone and you do have similar issues, and how do we solve those issues together? So it's working at the org level, and it's working at a Hampshire level, if you like. And the dream is that, you know, we make Hampshire a great wellbeing place.
Excellent. Thank you.
I know that there's some great, everyone wants to contribute. Kerry's got a great offer out there on the chat function as well about additional insight that she's happy to share. So, you know, hopefully this is the beginning of that network. Stay engaged with what we're creating, co-creating as a group of people going through similar challenges. So I'm going to officially draw the session to a close. I'd like to thank the panel members. I'd like to thank you for joining the call. Please keep your eyes peeled for the next session and stay in contact. Lots of resources that Helen, Terry and Christina have produced for this session. We'll make sure that you get those. We'll also put a recording of this session up on the Chamber of Commerce website for you to download at your leisure. But thank you very much once again. Absolutely mission critical activity, as referenced by Paul right from the get-go, that it's not it's absolutely mission critical that we start to develop this health and well-being and put that front and center alongside all of the other financial and operational elements. This has become, in my book, the most important thing that we need to focus our time on. So great session. Thank you for attending, and looking forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks' time. And any suggestions for themes or topics, then please feel free to suggest them. Until then, have a safe couple of weeks. Good luck, Diane, with bringing your team back. Reach out to the team and we can help. And thank you, the rest, for joining us. All the very best to you. If the panel members could just stay on the line, we'll have a quick catch up. Thank you. Take care.